everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to start the first video of my book review series. So one thing that I wrote in my journal is that I want to read 52 books this year. I picked 52 because there's 52 weeks in the year, and so I decided that I was going to say read a book for every week. So with these 52 books, I decided to make a video reviewing what I've read. I'll talk about the books I liked, the books I didn't like. After I finished a book, I keep track of my thoughts in a journal format over here. I just figured that this would be a good way for me to remember the books I've read, as well as give anyone else out there any book ideas. Maybe if you want to try reading a new series. If you guys have any suggestions on what to read, definitely leave them in the comments below because I'm always looking for new books to read. Without any further ado, let's get right into the reviews. So the first book I read this year was Take the Key and Lock Her Up by Allie Carter. This is the third book in a trilogy. Allie Carter, I've read some of her other series before. Heist Society and Gallagher Girls. Both are great series. I loved both of them. This series was not my favorite. This one was good, but there are a couple things that kind of were off to me. Something that Allie Carter does really well is she has a lot of really strong female characters. In Gallagher Girls and in Heist Society, there are a lot of really strong women that I loved reading about. There's so many interesting women, but it just felt like they weren't explored enough. It was filled with, a diverse cast of characters, and they all kind of felt unexplored. I felt a little let down by the fact that these characters didn't really have strong motivations. There are a lot of secondary characters that really could have played into the story, but it didn't feel like they were fully there. They seemed more like props than characters. The plot was definitely supposed to be more thriller, and it was supposed to be darker than her other series have been in the past. However, it just didn't work for me. So one thing that was quite disappointing, and something I kind of want to see people move away from in the young adult fiction genre, I want to see less of a focus on romance. Especially in young adult fiction, there's a lot of focus on like that teen romance, that will they, won't they get together. When it takes up part of the story, it becomes kind of, it reinforces that heteronormative girl gets the guy gets the girl, etc. And especially in this book, the romance felt very boring. I didn't really care. Wouldn't exactly recommend this series for people to read, but definitely check out her other series, Gallagher Girls and Heist Society. Those were amazing series, and I truly loved reading them. So for the second book I read this year, it was Bright Smoke, Cold Fire by Rosamund Hodge. This book I gave 3.5 out of 5. So the interesting thing about this series is that it takes the story of Romeo and Juliet and kind of puts it in this fantasy setting. I found this very interesting to read. It is, again, a young adult fiction novel. It's a fantasy novel. I definitely thought that this was a very engaging novel. I got through it very quickly, and I also really enjoyed finding out what was going to happen. Where it fell short for me was I wasn't interested in the Romeo and Juliet characters. The Rosalind character and the Paris character in this retelling were so much more compelling. I was more intrigued by the world and the political nature of this fantasy world rather than the weird romance. Rosamund Hodge, the author, was focusing more on the fantasy aspect and the world building aspect rather than the romance, which was great. But given what we know about Romeo and Juliet, it is hard for me to go into a Romeo and Juliet retelling without caring about Romeo and Juliet. This is the first book, and there is going to be a sequel. I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen when Romeo and Juliet get back together, because I don't really care about them, and obviously the whole point is them getting back together. So I'm interested to see how that goes. What I do have to commend the author on is the way that she built this world. I definitely wanted to know more. There are so many different aspects about this magic, about the world, about the history, that she could have just thrown at you and made you kind of confused, but it really was built on in a way that was interesting but not too explainy, and it definitely left you wanting more. You don't know everything coming out of this novel, so it was very interesting to learn about this world that she built. I'm excited to read the second book in this series. I definitely would read it again. It was definitely a good read, and I recommend it if you are interested in fantasy and if you like the story of Romeo and Juliet. Very compelling characters, very compelling story. Definitely enjoyed it a lot. The third book I read was The Rosemary Spell by Virginia Zimmerman. So I was traveling. I was just trying to find a book for the plane. I thought it was just going to be another one of those youngster finds a book, finds magic, etc., etc. I thought it was really interesting in the story. it set out. Because in the Rosemary spell, it tackles all these fantastic, crazy fantasy novels about, you know, that ordinary kid who discovers that they're actually extraordinary. So Harry Potter, Chronicles of Narnia, all those things. And it's really hard growing up then realizing that you're not magical. You're not that extraordinary protagonist in a novel. And the Rosemary spell kind of deals with that in an interesting way. So the interesting thing about this novel is that Zimmerman has Rosemary at a time in her life where she's not a preteen. She's not still in that young adolescent childhood. She's kind of on the line between wanting to believe all these childhood fantasies that she has, but also her older friend is growing up and she wants to be able to be a part of that adult world. In that way, it's kind of interesting because she's stuck at this time that a lot of kids feel really awkward in, where they want to grow up, but at the same time they don't want to leave everything that they've known as a child behind. As well, something I really liked about this book was that the main theme of memory and letting go of memory is something that was well woven throughout the entire novel. Really built in with that growing up theme too. So that's something I really, really liked about this novel, was that Zimmerman was able to take memory and also growing up and weave them together in a way that didn't feel forced and that didn't feel like they were at odds with each other. So it was really great reading this, and it is for a younger audience, someone who's about 13, 14, but reading it definitely reminded me of the way I felt when I was that age, and I definitely think that it's a good read, and I would definitely recommend it. So the last book I read was Empire of Storms. So it's the 5th book in Sarah J. Maas's series, Throne of Glass. This is a high fantasy young adult novel. Okay, so something I wrote, one of my favorite things about Maas's series is her ability to have versatile, vastly different, strong female characters. There are so many strong women besides Aelin, who's the main character, who pull you into the narrative. Manon is vicious and dark and not a true hero or moral person, but she is fully fleshed out and compelling. I love this about this series and these books. It is high fantasy, there's a ton of characters, and the most compelling characters are female. I love this series for its ability to introduce strong female characters who aren't just good, but they still remain strong characters because they're fully fleshed out. Strength doesn't always mean being physically strong. Strength doesn't always mean being a really good moral character. A strong character is a character that is fleshed out and believable. My favorite character from this series is Manon Blackbeak. She is dark and twisted, but I still root for her and I still love her motivations, and I think she is one of the strongest characters. But she's also one of the most morally gray and going towards the darker side of gray characters. It's great that Maas is able to bring these characters to life and bring these women together and have them, you know, weave together in a way that works, in a way that doesn't feel shoehorned. Something I don't quite like about this series is the amount of heterosexual relationships. There's also that idea of every character needs a romantic partner, which I don't think is necessary. So you kind of see characters start to pair up into twos, always typically heterosexual partnerships. So it's just kind of frustrating to see most of these characters paired off into heterosexual, or at least heterosexual appearing pairings with such a large cast of characters. I think there's definitely room for more queer relationships. There is a really healthy portrayal of sexuality in these novels, but there is room for diversity, and especially given that there are just tons of characters. I definitely think it was a good read. I think it was amazingly well written, and for a young adult novel, it's intricate and breathtaking in the way that it portrays this world. But other than that, it's the highest ranked book of the first 4, so I definitely would recommend reading this series if you like fantasy and if you like young adult fiction. So those are the first 4 books. Hope you guys enjoyed my reviews. If you are interested in the books, I'm going to leave their titles below as well as links to where you can purchase them, and you can kind of see a summary of the novel as well, so that way you can kind of get an idea of the book and read a little bit more about them. So the next 4 books I'm reading are All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven, Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, and The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm really excited to read those 4 books. I've already started All the Right Places. I'm loving it so far. I'm really excited to read The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I've heard so many good things about it. And yeah, I'm really excited for the next 48 books I'm gonna read. I'm so happy I was able to read these 4 books and share them with you guys. I really hope you guys like this video. If you like these reviews, if you're interested to hear more from me, definitely subscribe, because I'm going to be doing, again, 48 more books, doing 48 more reviews. And again, if you have any suggestions of books that you think I'd like to read, leave them in the comments below because I'm always looking for new books. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!